Usamos estampillas también.
Close enough.
You are now tuned in to your number one radio station.
Violent people.
Radio.
Radio, episode 41. I'm Dan Rice, and I'm joined by Sam. Sam going?
Hello. You sound very professional this week, Dan.
I'm thrilled to be back in front of an actual microphone, not just talking into my phone. So I'm giving it my all. Which I guess implies that a lot of weeks not. Just phoning it in.
Literally.
After the last 6 months,
I'm also
phoning it in.
Oh, that's
Literally.
true. Also joined by Pat.
Hey, what's up?
Pat, you've recently gone
I heard you
postal.
got your computer back in front of you.
People are saying that.
Wow.
Chris
Interesting
unfortunately
stuff.
couldn't join us. He is out with another sickness. I believe it's called the VP 100 flu. Oh, in his place, we have a very special guest. We are joined by JJ, who has a book coming out soon that we'll be talking about here. JJ, how's it going?
Not bad. Good morning from Japan, and I'm hoping your computer does not explode.
It could at any moment. Yeah, not only are you, I believe, a professor with her doctorate in rhetoric, which is already ridiculous that you would join us. You're calling in at, 8:30 in the morning?
It's actually 9:30. Not bad.
Oh, okay, all right.
No
Well, if it's
problem.
9:30,
Well-
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that
totally.
case.
Anyway,
I
so
think if Sam proposed...
Sam, the move here is around the 25-minute mark when you're editing it. Do a big explosion in the middle of Dan saying something.
Okay.
Like, put in the audio, and then like 15 seconds of silence, and then the podcast just continues. Just let people think that Dan's computer blew up for a second.
Okay, that sounds good.
You could just mute the rest of the audio from that point forward, too.
Also,
Yeah, I'm
beep out me saying this just now, like a 30-second long continuous beep, so that they're not spoiled.
I'm actually just gonna make airplane noises for 20 straight minutes that get progressively louder, and then the explosion. Really draw it out. Make sure we set up the payoff.
So in this scenario, I'm on my computer on a plane?
Well,
No, the
no,
plane's
your
coming
computer
toward you.
is being so violent towards you, it sounds like it's an airplane. I'm not even sure the computer's
Right.
broken if it doesn't sound like absolute trash. Also, I think your computer is broken because you keep cutting out. But that's a different story altogether.
Oh, fantastic. Do you guys want to launch into it? Sam, you watched any wrestling this week?
I watched 30 plus matches, Dan.
That's
Oh,
I'm watching wrestling these
Insane.
days.
Wow.
This is
So
back-to-back
sorry.
weeks of too much wrestling. I am a proud subscriber to CMLL's YouTube channel. And folks, I don't know if I can go back.
What tier?
The highest tier. You go
Oh.
all the way or
what a
don't
way
go
to
at
come
all.
out as you're rich. What a way to come out as rich.
Sorry, plebs. I'm over here watching the
Well,
CML
he has
YouTube channel.
he
Instead of
has
trying
the fan leyenda CMLL. What he doesn't have is his insulin. So there's a trade-off.
It was a great decision. I will regret it in about 1 month when I get hit again. But for now, what a decision. I'm loving every minute of it. There's so much good wrestling in CMLL. but I was catching up on as many things from 2024 as I could before I had to submit my BP 100 ballot. Chris isn't here, but I think we'll take a moment to say, hey, Chris received 84 ballots, beating last year's by 15 ballots, and 849 wrestlers were nominated. So wild stuff. And one of those wrestlers was Disturbio, because I watched a lot of Disturbio during this past week. The Instead of going through all 30 matches, though, I will just talk about the best one or so, which was Mad Dog Connolly versus B.A. Malkin from 01 USA in June of 2024. This is Mad Dog doing like modern day Attitude Era garbage, and it rocks beyond all recognition. Mad Dog at some one point gets the Mr. Sacco out of his tights, which is a great bit because he was just hurling fists at BA's head, and then he's whipping out the Mr. Sacco. Love it. It's silly. It's goofy. Good use of kendo sticks in this matchup. And yeah, it's great. Everyone should go watch it. It's on YouTube. Then I finally got into wrestling for 2025. Obviously, starting with Court Bauer's Major League Wrestling, because
Obviously.
I needed to. I needed to be like, oh yeah, wrestling
You
can
drop
be bad again.
$35 on CMLL, and then you're like, what I really need though is MLW.
Yeah.
Wait, did you think this was a bad show?
Which one?
The ML. Oh, I thought you just watched. Did you watch Imitation Games?
I don't remember what the name was, Dan.
Oh.
It was the January one.
Oh, no. I thought you watched the newest one. The newest one, I think, good side of MLW.
Well, maybe it is. First match is Neon versus Virus, a CMLL matchup. But I don't think Neon is particularly good, folks. I know he is like one of the high flyer youngsters that people are gravitating to these days. Not for me. Not for me. Not my cup of tea, per se. I mean, it is two luchadors kind of half-assing it in front of a Chicago audience, but still not great. And then obviously you're watching Paul London and Paul Walter Hauser versus the Andersons. What a spectacle. What a thing. It's a Texas tornado match. I do think PWH is a genuinely fun wrestler to watch, which is stupid to say. It should not be a real
Wait
thing.
until you hear what I watched. I mean, you're going to feel like a fucking genius after you hear what I watched this.
And the last, I'm excited. I'm excited to hear. The last match that I watched before hopping on is from German Wrestling Federation. Two Sweet Heroes versus the Goulias brothers. I'm longtime fans of the show. Will remember when I talked about the Goulias brothers versus Team Turbulence from last year. And I was like, oh, the Goulias brothers are incredible. I hope to see everything they do. And then they wrestle for a ton of promotions that have no access to footage that I could find. Now they're in the German Wrestling Federation, which not the case. They are always on YouTube, and they're a ton of fun. Like, I don't think Two Sweet Heroes are particularly good. Their offense is light as a feather, and while being kind of big dudes, they both try to wrestle like they're Tito Santana. I don't know. It's a weird combination of interest, but the Goulias Bros are good in this match. There's two big burly dudes who wrestle like big burly dudes. They can work a heat segment like actually good, which is not something I see in 2024, 2025 wrestling. So just fun times. So I watched a lot of wrestling this week, but those are kind of the highlights.
I'm actually gonna go next then, because I need to talk about MLW as well, because Court Bauer is running this stuff. I watched.
He's doing great work.
I watched their newest show because I'm updating my MLW. I'm not catching up. I'm always caught up. I would like to say my favorite thing about
Damn, you lost you.
Neon and you lost me. Can you hear me?
Can hear you
We
now,
heard
but
your
anything
favorite-
you
your
said,
favorite
the
thing
thing I
about
like
Knee.
about Neon.
Oh, okay. The thing I like about Neon and MLW is that they're pretending he's not already a part of Sky Team. Like they're building up
Okay.
to him. They're building up to him joining Mystico and Dorada, the people he already teams with in Mexico.
That's cool.
So that's like
cool.
a cool story. On this show, he wrestled Kushida, and if you needed 10 minutes of people doing Guerrero Malenko roll-ups, they got it taken care of. Outside of that, you have Okamura versus Ariel Dominguez, and I've always liked Ariel Dominguez. Like he was in MLW years ago too, but they just use him as like a jobber, and that's what they do here. And then Alex Kane and Mr. Thomas faced CW Anderson and Brock Anderson in the first blood match. This actually ruled. I'm like fully a Mr. Thomas guy now, and Alex Kane's awesome.
Yeah, you're a big CHIKARA fan, I know.
Yeah, Faye, what's her name? Faye Jackson. She gets involved, and she's really laying it in the CW for some reason. And the only other thing that's noteworthy. Oh, I do have to say because Pat's here. There's Delmi Exo versus Tara Zepp. You didn't mention that Tara Zepp's horrible.
I think I've mentioned that Tara Zepp is horrible like every single time I've brought her up.
I don't think you got it across to me. Like one of the worst wrestlers in the world, respectfully. Like
you gotta go back. You gotta go back and watch her versus Sonico from one of the 2 Pacific North Death shows. It's free on YouTube. It is insane. I mean, it's like a crazy plunder death match. But there are points where Sonico is literally having to manhandle her into the correct position for moves. Like getting her into position to take a suplex looks rougher and harsher than actually doing the suplex.
Well, see, here's the thing. Delmi Exo can't do that. So this match is 3.5 minutes, and 2 of the minutes total probably are them like kind of staring at each other because Tara's clearly supposed to do something and then doesn't. So that's fun.
I mean, your first mistake was watching a Delmi Exo match. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I got to stay up with the MLW Women's World Featherweight title. I don't know what you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you come on next week and you're like, I really got into Team C Stars, I'm just gonna like leave the call.
And then the highlight of the show is a 4-way, which is Akira, Bobby Fish, Matthew Justice, and Paul Walter Hauser. And Paul Walter Hauser has been a part of MLW for a while now, but for some reason this match is just like everyone laying it in, beating the shit out of him. Like he takes like so many knees to the face, and the spot that I saw was a lot on Twitter was when he took the chair spot, or not the chair, the table bump on the outside and like hit his head. But what that doesn't really show is that the kick he takes to make that fall is just brutal. And I'm back on Paul Walter Hauser. He's cool. And then they do the fun angle afterwards where they're getting the Rogue Horseman and Matthew Justice and Paul Walter Hauser going back and forth on the mic, and they're getting pulled apart by MLW security. But then it turns out it's not MLW security; it's just goons for the 4 Horsemen. And,
I'm not sure if this was officially announced before the show, but MLW has released a press release as of 30 minutes ago to announce that Paul Walter Hauser is now an executive producer and is signed with Artists First for representation. Incredible stuff here. This is big. This is big.
Yeah. So people should watch MLW.
What does
I don't know why.
For the show. What does it mean, the Horseman? It means PWH is going over every step of the way from here on out. He's got the book. He's got the book.
And then you have the excellent angles involving Eric Bischoff and Cesar Duran and Cesar Duran's daughter who got engaged. It's just good stuff. So everyone should watch it. Outside of that, in like a very different way, I watched today the Travis Williams and Timothy Thatcher match from Dusk Pro came out, and that's a match of the year contender. That match is just so awesome. I've watched it twice already. It's only like 12 or 13 minutes. Thatcher comes out and he immediately finds Daniel Makabe in the crowd and like daps him up, pretends he's gonna fight him, and then just this one. I think it's the best Travis Williams has looked, and I'm already a fan of him. And that's free on YouTube, on Dusk Pro's YouTube, so everyone should go check that out. And then I watched a match which really aligns a lot of the taste of this podcast. Tarzan Duran went to Mexico, and he faced Cerebro Negro Jr., which really feels like a lot of our
Duran match.
Tarzan Duran is in a class with Tara Zepp as far as in-ring skill.
Hard disagree. Starting now, because this match was cool.
I mean, yeah, he does cool shit. So does Tara Zepp. You watched a bad match where she just stood around.
But no, here's what's so crazy is it wasn't a death match. I was ready for this to be plunder and death, and it was just a regular match, and it was good. They do like 1 minute of like fun lucha spots that Tarzan clearly learned earlier that day, and like that was awesome.
That's blown. That he was in a match that didn't involve like brandishing a kitchen knife is genuinely confusing to me.
Now on the Zona 23 show that hasn't gone up yet, he is on that show doing a death match because I know he posted like a picture of him needing stitches in the back of his head. But that's what the Demos.
Yeah, he's in like a no ring canvas, barbed wire ropes. All crime is legal, including murder, purge style match.
Yeah, so that's gonna be fun. I don't know when that's going on IWTV. Outside of that, I watched some 2025 Mad Dog. He was in Naptown Pro for a dog collar match with Josh Crane, and Mad Dog Connolly, a dog collar match. You're gonna get good stuff, and they do a fun angle afterwards where Josh Crane's getting beat down by Top Team, heel stable, and then Mad Dog Connolly come to his aid, and the next day there's a big 10-man tag, which is Top Team versus Dale Patrick, Eric Dillinger, Josh Crane, Cavern Canyon, and Mad Dog. So it's basically just Mad Dog and a bunch of Indiana boys, and it was weird because they called it like the 3 stages of doom, but it was just two falls that were regular matches, kind of, and then the last fall was anything goes, tables and chairs. And
the last one was the doom.
The last one's the doom.
It should have been called 2 booms and a doom.
I really liked it, but the first fall was really fun because Top Team like was getting beat up, and then they're the heels, and they're like, "What if we just cheated?" And they all 5 came in the ring and beat someone down and got a pin. And I went, "That's good stuff. More people should just cheat like that." That's pretty much what I watched. But if you only have to watch one of them, obviously watch Travis Williams versus Timothy Thatcher. But Court Bauer, he is the sponsor of the show, and he says you should watch MLW as well. I think we should pivot to JJ now because I think Pat's going to talk about some of the worst stuff I've ever heard about. So I'd rather hear what JJ watched.
Oh, just you wait. A couple of days ago, a Montreal promotion called Interspecies Wrestling posted a show from 2008. So I got to watch some interspecies wrestling. I don't know. Do you know them?
Yes.
I've seen the odd match from them. Most of my Montreal wrestling familiarity is IWS, unfortunately.
Okay. It was definitely a wrestling show. If you are into watching large bears wrestle people and cows and a panda, Kevin and El Generico were indeed on the card. El Generico was wrestling a zombie. Yeah. And I'm saddened to have to tell you this, but the best match on the card, in my opinion, was the winner kills, cooks, and eats the loser match versus Muhammad the Terrorist Cow and Flipty Burger. In a fans
Flipty
bring the
Burger is a great
Legos.
name.
It is. It was a fans bring the Legos barnyard brawl match. And Muhammad the Terrorist Cow was much better than I expected him to be.
This really feels like I let Pat go.
Flipty Burger, actually, that was the last time Flipty Burger was ever actually seen. He is also player Uno, as a matter of fact.
He's pulling double duty on the show.
But apparently he was killed, cooked, and eaten backstage after the match. So he was never seen.
They absolutely should have done that as like a Dark Order angle.
That would have been amazing. The return of Muhammad, the Terrorist Cow.
Or just with Evil Uno in a versus Hangman Page or whoever in a loser is
winner kills, cooks, and eats the loser.
I mean, maybe that's what Hangman and Swerve are building towards.
Winner burns down the loser's house. That would escalate from there. So I watched that, and that was it was a lot of fun, to be totally honest. Everybody was just having a fun time. The IWS account posted about how the ring was about 2 hours late. The truck with the ring in it broke down. So the truck with the ring finally showed up at about 9 o'clock. And everybody, all the fans, helped them put up the ring in about 20 minutes. So it was a good memory for everybody. The other thing I watched recently, I'm obviously in a obscure Montreal show sort of place, was I suddenly got a panicky feeling that I had gotten a fact wrong in the book, and I had to go watch an IWS show to make sure it was actually correct. So I watched IWS Know Your Enemies from 2003, which had 2 different El Generico matches on it. What's interesting about that one historically, book-relatedly, is that that's the match that Kevin Steen sneaked into to see what wrestling outside of his wrestling school was like. And you can catch him, you can see him in the audience here and there, reacting to the wrestling. So it's fun. There's a table that explodes quite effectively, actually. A couple of death matches. The title match is Drew Onyx versus Green Phantom in a 2 out of 3 falls, but my DVD crapped out after the second fall, so I didn't get to see the whole match. Yeah.
This is a Green Phantom podcast.
I think I've heard you mention him before.
I'm Team Sexy Eddie all the way.
One must have strong opinions about Montreal wrestling. And actually, the last thing I watched recently was indeed a 01 show, which had C.W. Anderson on it, but it's from 2005. So it kind of cracked me up to hear him showing up again on the podcast. He was teaming up with Jay Lethal.
My goodness.
Yeah. I was watching that one because it was Kevin Steen's first show in Japan. And I had not been able to get my hands on it for a long time. And I finally found it and was able to watch it. The title match was, the main event was Dick Togo and Sanjay Dutt versus Alex Shelley and Masato Tanaka. And it was quite good. It was really fast. They came out swinging and got a lot of blood and a lot of flips in.
Yeah,
so that's what I was watching this week.
That main event was a match that showed up on a lot of comps back in the day.
Oh, I bet, actually.
So I've seen that match.
Had that kind of energy.
I've seen the rest of that show. Yeah, it was a fun time.
Yeah, the other interesting match on it was Amazing Kong and Steve Corino teaming up to fight Saki Miyamura and Spanky, Brian Kendrick. So that was pretty wild. Yeah, it was fun. Actually, I enjoyed it. Amazing Kong and Corino were very funny together. Yeah. It was it's the only show of theirs I've ever watched, because I haven't been able to get my hands on a lot of it. especially that far back when Steen was there.
Oh man,
That's
That
funny.
was
I don't
the
really have
era
any memory
where-
of Kevin Steen in Zero
He
One.
was
I
only
think
there
of him
for
as
like
Dragon
2
Gate.
matches. Like
Oh,
2
well, there you go.
matches, and they are very hard to find. So
That was the dawn of Big Boy Carino, because I think it was Hashimoto told him, like, you're not believable as a heavyweight. You need to just get bigger, however you do it.
huh.
So he went from, in ECW, he was a fairly slender gentleman by wrestling standards. And then after 0-1, he just tacked on mass.
Bulked up, huh?
All right,
so
Pat,
that
what
was
did you
that was my watching, yeah. Can you
what did you
top
torture yourself with?
watching interspecies?
All right. I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on how you value comedy wrestling as to whether or not this tops interspecies wrestling. Are the three of you familiar with an organization known as the Hardcore Hustle Organization from Williamstown, New Jersey?
I'm not.
It is.
never been referred to as that.
Let's say, is that H2O?
I mean, that is H2. That's what H2O stands for, Hardcore Hustle Organization. And that is the promotion run by Mr. Matt Tremont, in what appears to be a warehouse that he is squatting in. If you told me that they just brought a ring to an abandoned building and set up a merch table, I would completely believe it.
Sam's been there.
I've been there. It looks sketchy on the inside too.
I mean, it looks like everyone who is there attending the show and wrestling in the show is in the process of buying meth at that moment. And frankly, that's what I love about it. The first match was the opening match was Gabriel Sky versus Matt Tremont in a ladder match. And if you've seen 2025 Matt Tremont, you know that for him to book himself in a ladder match is demented, especially when they bring out the ladder. And you know how ladders have those little arms on the side that connect the two sides of the ladder so that the ladder doesn't just collapse out from underneath you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
One of those is just snapped clean off.
Heck yes.
So they are going into this match with a broken ladder. They immediately break the other ladder. There's not much Matt Tremont can do in a ladder match other than stand there and eat topes from Gabriel Sky. But I think as an introduction into the, frankly, bizarre and absurd world of, not just there's deathmatch wrestling from like major indies like GCW, and then there's like, some guys going, let's put on a show level deathmatch wrestling. This is a good step downward for people who want to sink deeper into the mire. And following this was a scramble match, which reminded me of old CZW in a wonderful way, because old CZW, you would get matches where you'd have 6 people in the match and like one guy knew how to do moves. And even though all of his moves are just like finishing moves from wrestling video games, he's able to do them without looking like he was actually trained. So he comes away looking like a superstar. I mean, that was like Sanjay Dutt in so many old CZW and IWA MS matches, stuff like that, where it was like, okay, the guy who looks like he actually went to wrestling school comes away looking like a superstar because he's up against 5 guys who just gave the promoter a case of beer and said, can I be on the show? So that was a very nostalgic thing for an old weirdo like me. Unfortunately, it's then followed by Low Life Louis Ramos versus his son, who looks like what the Rizzler will look like when he's 22. And that match, by my count, was about 15 years long. None of them did anything remote. Like, they were both immediately winded from running halfway across the ring. A lot of the match was kick-based, and not a single kick came within a foot of the other person. But they also, I mean, the thing that people were there to see was them hitting each other on the head with TVs. And the really funny thing about the match is they are clearly they're putting their hand up for like, weapon shots to the head, but the hand is not actually, it's like, when someone goes into the bathroom and just runs the tap for a minute instead of washing their hands. It's like that for protecting your head because they're still taking the shots flush on the top of their head. So seeing them do that over and over again, I was just like, I've started to wonder, is this a bit? There were some other matches that, honestly not worth getting into, who cares? But I did find for 2024, Sam had Mike Payne, aka Michael Payne, aka Payne, aka author of Payne. I have found my Mike Payne, my personal 2025 Mike Payne. Let me tell you guys about Brax. Braxx. Brax has the wrestling skills of being kind of tall and fairly wide. He has a genuine baby face. He has big chipmunk cheeks. If you told me he was 17 years old, I'd believe you. If you told me he was 26 years old, I'd believe you. He just looks like that. And he wrestled in a fatal four-way for the H2O Danny Havoc Hardcore Championship against Anthrax with two X's, Alex Stretch, and the reigning champion Neil Diamond Cutter, who is an old man dressed up like Jun Kasai. Brax wrestled this match in a t-shirt and what looked like Dickies work pants. About 2 minutes into the match, his pants break, and he has to sit by the side of the ring for someone to help him out of his pants. I guess because they're tucked into his boots, and he can't like unlace his boots to like pull his pants out. Fortunately, he's wearing leggings under the pants. Unfortunately, the leggings are also falling down the entire match. He does nothing correctly the entire show. I mean, he makes Tara Zepp look like fucking Gentaro. He is my new favorite wrestler, and I will be watching every Brax match I can find in 2025. That will be my big push for the VP 2025 voters is people cannot sleep on Brax.
Please do not besmirch the name of Mike Payne, a non-ironically good pro wrestler.
You got to see this
shit in the bed.
No, you got to see there's shitting the bed, and then there's shitting the bed so hard it comes back around to being transcendent.
Okay.
Like I'm watching this guy in a four-way match that's just all guys throwing each other onto like can boards and whatever the fuck. And I'm just like, I need to see everything this guy does because he is fascinating to me. Also, the show was H2O Takeoff. I never actually said that. It's their January show. Expect to hear a lot more about H2O because I think this is my new.
This is your new GCW?
Last year I watched 85 GCW shows or something like that. Fortunately, H2O only runs like twice a month. So I think this is going to be my project for the year is watching all of Matt Tremont's terrible shows. I mean, the main event for the show was Cody Manhorn versus Declan Grant. I mean, if you have ever heard of either of those two people, that tells you everything you need to know that is a main event match.
Brax doesn't have a cage match, so I'm trying to do like a deep dive where I can find out about Brax. In my mind, I'd already created like headcanon that he was teaming with Anthrax because they both end with double X's. They don't.
Nope. Anthrax and Alex Stretch team up as Peace, Love, and Death match. Brax teams with Matt Tremont. So you can tell he's the star pupil.
Yeah.
That's definitely the sign-ons I'm getting right now. Is anyway, H2O wrestler ID'd? WWE ID'd?
Happily.
That's a good question. Hopefully WWE ID finds Lowlife Louis Ramos and his giant son, sends him straight to NXT. Hopefully they find great talent like Frankie Hendricks and JB Anderson and Mouse. But yeah, other than that, I watched I watched a lot of YouTube videos of like CZW highlights from 20 years ago. And I got to say, CZW from 20 years ago, great shit.
I saw you share that in Discord. I watched the one you shared, and I was like, "This is a good time."
Yeah, the one with Madman Pondo
As a
walking
Nazi,
out doing a Nazi. Yeah, literally with a duct tape swastika on his shirt.
Well,
and you're
all
right.
right.
There's somebody that like everyone comes to the door or the curtain as he comes out, but there's one guy who I can't place. I'm trying to figure out who it was, whose mouth is literally like at the floor. Well, rightfully
Yeah.
so. It's just very funny, like to see, like, there's like he's the only one with the actual like head on his shoulders who's like, why is this happening?
And it's immediately preceded by a clip of Thumbtack Jack saying like, "Oh, ha ha ha! Everyone makes fun of me. They say, oh, the German's a Nazi. Ha ha ha!" Smash cut to Madman Pondo doing a Nazi entrance because he's facing Thumbtack Jack.
I think that promo was actually at the time in response to that, possibly. They just
I think they just juxtaposed it.
Yeah, they just put it in a different order. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're watching H2O instead of GCW. Honestly, I think this is an upgrade. I look forward.
I'm going to watch GCW too. I want to watch the LA shows. I'm going to watch the big GCW shows. I'm just not going to watch like I could give a fuck what they do in Illinois from now on.
I have a lot of families that's addicts, so I know this kind of behavior.
Well, no, because the Atlantic City shows are actually good. It's when you watch like GCW goes to like Tempe, Arizona. It's like, okay, great.
I think you should start worrying if you are combining GCW and actually good together in some sort of sentence structure. It's worrying.
I mean, you did read my whole thing about like, hey, here's all the actually good stuff from GCW, and now you're months later, you're gonna start pulling this card on me. I mean, if you do so, I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna put fucking Mance Warner at number 3 next year.
Go with God. Go with God.
I'm going to cancel out any Disturbio votes.
Well, I think that covers what we've all been watching this week. As Sam already mentioned, VP 100's deadline's already passed, so we should be seeing the results of those as soon as Chris is well. And
and the offer is still when the call for blurbs goes up, anyone who writes 20 blurbs can send me a match and I will watch it. You can send me GCW matches. You can send me actually good matches. I don't give a shit. Just don't send me stuff that's like an hour long.
Don't send him GCW. We're clearly going to watch it anyway.
Yeah, no, send me GCW from the past.
I believe Chris is also super close to a Lucha Roundup, is what I've heard.
So he's 99 sick.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When he's healed, he said he's 90% done.
Yeah, but he's getting really ran through the ringer here.
It's one illness after the other, so it's not a good time for him. But
I mean, you guys are knocking me for GCW. Watching IWRG is literally killing Chris. Like, it's physically.
This is true.
It's true.
This is true.
Get the Lucha flu.
He watches literally, I think, every minute of Lucha footage that exists, and I love it because he'll watch all of IWRG and he'll be like, "Yeah, 2 of those matches were good." He's doing the Lord's work, though. Is there anything else we need to plug about the site right now, Sam?
Nah, you don't have a computer that works like on a consistent basis, so you're definitely not writing. I've now gotten onto the other side of 2024 wrestling. Maybe I'll write something now that's done, but who knows? Cora will have
You got to do the CMLL roundup because I don't think CMLL.
I did think about it. I did think about it for a second. I was like, what if I just call it the Lucha Roundup? Not that one. Number 1. And Lucha go from there. Ooh, round down. That's a good one. Koro come out recommended matches on Friday. He already had one up for last week that I didn't post because I'm an idiot. But it will go up this week.
Desert Island comp?
I don't know why you had to say it. I didn't say it, Dan.
I'm sorry.
Do you think I didn't
thought you
say
forgot
it for a reason?
I thought you forgot it.
Oh, you thought I forgot it. Okay. Trust me, I don't forget it. I just don't do it. It's there. Okay. It's being edited. It's halfway done.
Well, I have something you can post about that if that's ever going to come out. So there you go. We got a little written, a little audio.
We gotta rework that title, but yes.
Okay, what the title of what I
Full
wrote?
inside baseball.
Oh
What?
my! You don't think people get Lost reference in 2025?
I didn't.
Oh. Okay. Well, speaking of me writing, it kind of brings us to our big top because I do want to write a review for a book that's coming out, but the review copies aren't out yet. So instead, we're just gonna have JJ spoil the whole book right now. Welcome to the big top.
The whole book.
Yeah, I figured you could just run it down bit by bit.
Okay, I'll just speed read it.
Yeah. The big top this week is Fight Forever, the Ballad of Kevin and Sami. I just wanted to ask, because again, you are a professor, you do seem like you have grown up responsibilities and jobs. What led you to not only liking wrestling, we can start with there, like what led you to your wrestling journey, and then what led you to want to write a book about it?
Well, I came really late to wrestling. I ended up watching wrestling. I didn't get into it as a kid or as a teen. I started watching it because after I got married, my husband liked watching stuff while he worked as sort of wallpaper. And one of the things he liked to watch was wrestling. And I, on the other hand, am one of those people where if the TV is on, I end up watching it. So he turned it on just to have in the background, and I ended up watching it. So I got into wrestling that way. But I didn't. It mostly was still kind of wallpaper for me for many years. We started watching it regularly in about 2008, after we had moved to Japan, in part because it was a good way to watch some American media. At the time, it was kind of hard. It was not as easy to get streaming stuff. So they started running some WWE stuff on the TV here belatedly. And so we started watching there. And when the network came out in 2013, we decided to sign up for it. And after I got the network, I decided to go back and watch a bunch of NXT. And that was where Sami Zayn was. And I had no idea that he had been anybody before Sami Zayn. I heard rumors of some El Generico person, but I had no idea who that was. But it was at the beginning of Sami Zayn's run for the Road to Redemption. And after he won the title and Kevin came out and attacked him, I was like, I want to find everything they ever did together. I figured I'd have to go find like 10 matches. And shortly after that, I realized I had dug myself a very deep hole. And I ended up finding as many of them as I could and became kind of obsessed with the fact that there seemed to be a through line to their matches that went across a bunch of different promotions, and I wanted to put it together and see what that through line was. And that's what eventually became the book.
Okay, so you went back to watch Sami and Kevin just as a fan. You didn't do it with the thoughts of writing a book?
No, not at all at first. At first it was just for the sake of learning more because I thought they were really interesting. And I wanted to know what it was that had gotten them to the point of getting to NXT.
Have you written non-wrestling books? Because just jumping into writing a book is interesting.
I've written a couple. I had to write a PhD thesis about community building on Usenet. Dating myself.
Thank God you weren't into wrestling there. Oh man,
I was not, but I was into comic books and had a lot of the same vibe. But I'm betting Usenet wrestling communities were pretty wild.
This is me taking a swing based on what I know of comic book Usenet and what I know of wrestling Usenet. Comic book Usenet was all about presenting the theory that here's why Iceman is actually gay and Marvel is afraid to admit it. Wrestling was all about the theory of here's why Shawn Michaels is gay and I'm going to call him 8 million homophobic slurs in the space of one post. So that I think is the dividing line between the two.
A pretty fine line. But I did write that. I wrote a book about English use on the internet for a Japanese class. So to be used in Japanese classes about English slang on the internet, which was out of date a month after it got published, if not sooner, of course. And I've written some other media analyses, not books though, just essays.
Because the idea, as we talked about it before we started recording, is that the literature landscape of professional wrestling is pretty shallow. Like there's not a lot of books written on the subject, and I don't think it's for, like Pat was saying, it's not because of lack of material. It's just I'm not really sure if I have a reason why. It's just, there's just not a lot. There's just not a lot out there.
When I started being interested, yeah. Sorry.
Well, I think it's that there are a lot of books about wrestling that are about the biography aspect of wrestling. There's a book about there's like Ring of Hell, which is a biography of Chris Benoit and Nancy. There's Way of the Blade, which is reviewing matches and presenting the biographical data and the storyline data leading up to those matches. There's not a lot of critical wrestling writing in the same way that there would be about film or television or novels or poetry or anything like that. And so I was curious as to the approach that you took in analyzing, because obviously you're not writing a book that's just like, and then Kevin and Sami did this, and then they went to PWG and did that, and then they had a match in IWS, and then you are analyzing this in some way. And I was curious as to how you approached that, whether it was through a lens of film theory, rhetorical analysis, give us some insight into how, like, once you decided there's more here that I want to crack into, there's something that I want about this that I want to express myself in delving into. How did you go about that?
Yeah, I agree. Part of what I was thinking about while you were talking was when I went looking for wrestling books, what I found a lot of were mostly, biographies or autobiographies about the people involved. The thing that really inspired me actually was when I started doing research and trying to find out more about the really early days of Kevin and Sami's career. There was the IWS publisher, Michael Ryan, who went by the name Lacor, who wrote up reviews of shows or hyped up the next show. But he talks about how he started off doing just a list of these are the moves that happened during the match and realized that that was not actually the most compelling way to talk about wrestling. So he started trying to find sort of the stories that were connecting these shows and these characters. And as a result, he had this very sort of playful way of talking about stories and about characters that kind of wandered on the line between fiction and reality. He was the person who made up a lot of El Generico's backstory, for example. And he was really interested in sort of finding a connecting story. And I really admired that. I thought that was a really great way to talk about wrestling. And so that's more or less the thing that inspired me to get into it. I mentioned when I was talking about the book on my Substack that my approach is kind of like a novelization of a media text. You know how you can see a movie and then you can often go buy a book that basically describes what happens in the movie but adds more description, more depth, talks about the motivations of the characters, what they're thinking, what they're feeling in ways that you can't get from watching the text. But it's a sort of educated guess about what the characters are thinking and doing at the time. And so that was kind of the approach that I wanted to take when I was wrestling. Part of my training is in rhetoric, like you mentioned, rhetorical theory, which is all about finding connections. I took a ton of classes in graduate school about finding connections in texts and making those connections and figuring out what they meant. And so it ended up being a really useful skill in looking at wrestling. I never told my PhD advisor that I was studying wrestling, and I'm sure she would have found that pretty amazing. But that was kind of the approach that I ended up taking.
That's interesting because I wasn't familiar with your Twitter account. Is Myth Gifts Wrestling?
Mm-hmm.
I believe is the
I think just Myth Gifts, yeah.
Yeah, Myth Gifts. And that's your approach there. It seems like, I mean, and Twitter's, just full of GIF accounts that are either dunking on bad wrestling or just showing, what they consider
A
spectacular
lot of high
moves.
spots, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Or in some cases, it seems just to be posting GIFs at random just for, interaction and, likes. But yours seems to be the idea behind yours is digging deeper into what the moment was. Where's the timeline in you deciding to write this book and deciding to, like, how long has your Twitter account been around, and like when did you decide to start doing that?
I started on Tumblr, and I'm still there, but I switched to Twitter in, I think, 2015, 2016, in part because somebody started stealing my GIFs from Tumblr and posting them on Twitter. And when someone called them on it, not me, but somebody else called them on it, and they said, well, this person isn't posting on Twitter, so I don't see why I shouldn't post their GIFs on Twitter. And I said, well, okay, I guess I gotta make a Twitter account so that they can't say that anymore. So that's when I started up on Twitter.
Were they stealing your GIFs and your, like, what you would write about it, or just your GIFs?
Mostly just the GIFs.
Oh, okay. Because I always
So
like
they
when I see
didn't
people
add their
just
own
stealing it,
thoughts about it. So,
this person isn't on Twitter, so it's okay if I steal their content, is like extremely within wrestling. Like that's
it is a very wrestling feeling,
way
isn't it?
Yeah. It's like, well, they're not in this promotion, so I can absolutely do this.
It's a time-honored tradition, basically.
So like I said, you said you came late to wrestling. I find most of those fans crazy because I feel like a lot of us are born in this, and we're
in what way? How would you sum that up?
Well, because most of us were born into this. I don't remember not watching wrestling. It's like, do I have an option? I don't know. I watch wrestling, so it's like, man, to choose that in your adult life.
Why would anybody choose this path?
It's like wrestling companies don't make it easy. Non-wrestling fans don't make it easy, and wrestling fans don't make it easy.
Yes, you're right about all of that. Yeah, absolutely. My sister, when I started writing about it, my sister asked me, how do I start watching this thing that you're interested in? Where do I start? As an impossible question to answer, right? I don't know, just turn on the TV and see what's on, mostly, because it's dense.
It's a bit like asking, how do I start listening to music?
Yeah. Where does one start? Just because there's so much, Well,
that's kind of what you said about Sami and Kevin, was you're like, well, where do I start with them? Let me just go back a few matches, and you realize, like, oh, this goes back, years
and at first
years.
It was impossible. I got on YouTube and I typed in Kevin Steen and El Generico and got 50 links, and they were all posted fairly recently, so I couldn't tell what year they had happened in. So it was just this random chaos of, well, in this match they seem to be friends, in this match they hate each other, in this match they're tag team partners. And it was only once I started really putting it together and trying to put it in some kind of chronological order that I realized that, wait, this actually makes sense. This holds together across promotions, which I thought was kind of amazing, because that means that they were the ones focusing on the story. It wasn't a story that a booker had given them or a promoter had given them, that they were the ones that wanted to focus on this relationship between the characters.
And how much of the outside the ring, behind the scenes stuff like that do you focus on in the book? Like, did you, try to read old interviews with Kevin and Sami, or watch old shoot interviews and see, what their thoughts are on that and how they went about,
I had already watched a ton of shoot interviews because, Kevin has the Kevin Steen show, which he did with High Spots, where he sat down with like 36 different wrestlers and talked for 2 or 3 hours with each of them. And I had just watched all of those because I was interested in him. And of course, because he's the host, he isn't talking about himself a whole lot, but there's bits and pieces here and there which become really interesting, where he talks about El Generico's attitude towards calling a match, for example. And so that ended up becoming definitely a source. I try not to pull a whole lot of backstage stuff, politicking, interpersonal relationships into it, because it's not official. But Kevin's the kind of person that consistently does pull those things into the storyline. Like, he and Jim Cornette had backstage friction, and eventually it became front stage story. So them talking shit about each other off the record becomes on the record eventually. And Kevin tends to do that a lot.
He's a very metatextual wrestler in that.
Yes. Yeah. Very much.
What happens, you have to almost become familiar with the stories that were circulating at the time of, I think it was Cornette refused to book him because he was, Cornette thought he was too fat.
Yes.
And without that, without the context, unless you are a smart mark like us, that's half the story, is being plugged in and understanding that there is a whole backstage element to wrestling. It's not just what you are viewing. I think Steen and Sami Zayn in particular are like emblematic of that, in the way that they've run, what is it now, like a 26-year storyline between them?
Yep, pretty much. And yeah, Kevin is actually really, really good at deliberately using that stuff. Like, he had heard when he was feuding heading toward the Ring of Honor top title, he had heard that they were going to be shutting down the message boards and rebooting them. And basically he said, oh wait, let me use that. And he, quote unquote, hacked the message boards and started posting all sorts of shit about how he hated Ring of Honor and wanted to murder everybody in it, until they had to delete the message boards. So he turned that planned event of changing the message boards into part of his storyline. And actually, when I talked recently with him and Sami, they talked about how they deliberately planted rumors that Kevin was going to have to retire just before he turned heel. And they deliberately they would like talk to some influential fan and be like, yeah, it sucks that Kevin's knee is so bad, and don't tell anybody, but he might have to retire. And then they watched those rumors spread, and Sami said, once Dave Meltzer talked about how Kevin might have to retire, we knew we had him.
Oh, I know firsthand how easy it is to just say stuff to Meltzer and it ends up in the Observer.
Yeah.
I think
so. They knew how to.
I think I am quoted
game the system.
I am in the Wrestling Newsletter of Record calling the second La Parka a crippled Frankenstein.
Congratulations.
So it is very easy to just send stuff to Dave and it's in there.
Well, one of the reasons I'm looking forward to the book is because, from the opposite angle, having lived, like, I was a fan the entirety of the Steen and Generico's, run. I'm pretty sure that I want to say that Steen had a dark match on a Ohio card at some point in Ring of Honor, or maybe I went to a Ring of Honor show somewhere else where they had a dark card. But I remember him being full on Mr. Wrestling, and I want to say a 4 or 6 way dark match. And so, but it's been so long that it's like, how many of those matches did I miss? Did I skip? How many of them do I conflate as one thing in my mind? But the period that stands out, you're talking about the Kevin Steen show, is that period where Sami got signed and Steen wasn't. I remember being like heartbroken for Kevin, because I'm like, well, this is
yes,
he's never gonna make it. Sami did. Like, I didn't think WWE would hire him, and then so all that works. So, like, that's real life stuff, but it plays perfectly in a story they've already started and then continued on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually very relieved that I got to skip that period of time and only come back to it later, because it must have been brutal. And to be fair, I think it was probably really brutal for Kevin as well. Because he's talked about how he did not think that he would ever be tapped by WWE. When he wasn't sure that he was going to make it, he went back and forth. So a lot of the Kevin Steen show feels to me like an audition tape for WWE. Basically saying, look, listen to me, look at my thoughts about wrestling. A lot of what he's doing during that year and a half that Sami is in NXT and he is not, is one really long, really intense audition for NXT.
That's interesting. I can see it like that. So how, since the story is still ongoing, when does your book end? Because obviously, I mean, they just had a match.
Yeah. I kind of have to arbitrarily cut it off after they win the tag team titles. Because that's such a good ending point. Although, of course, I also have to have an afterword being like, well, obviously it's going to keep going from here. We're going to stop here. But it's obviously not the end of the story.
That's
it was a little frustrating to have it move on without me.
Well, another struggle in wrestling is that I don't know when you could ever fully know the story's over outside of, I mean, not to be too dark, but death, because wrestlers don't ever really retire. So they could have their big final singles match, and then Kevin could come out of retirement, or Sami could come out of retirement. So how do you know when to end the story, quote unquote?
When I was watching an old interview with Kevin in like 2006 or so. And at the time, he was like, well, I'd love to wrestle Steve Corino, but he's retired now. But maybe he'll come out of retirement again. Like, oh, yes. Yes, he will. Many times.
I mean, we've seen that being literally physically incapable of working a match still doesn't stop people from unretiring. So
yeah,
I think Dan is correct. The story's only over once you're writing about their kids fighting.
Yeah. And then that is potentially a continuation of the story, I guess.
I'm sure Kevin's son's like a giant too. Last I saw a
He's
picture of him.
much taller than Kevin.
Yeah.
He and Sami's son are out of sync, though. Sami's son's only about 3 years old, so a little tough to have a continuation of the feud there.
It's going to be an unfair match. Well, is there anything else you want to tell our listeners about the book, or I mean, outside of they should go to the Indiegogo and buy it?
Well, I can say it was a real thrill to write. It was very, very satisfying to finally put everything in one place and put it all together. I think part of why I love Kevin and Sami and I'm really happy about the book is that I think they're pretty much unique in wrestling. I say that, and I know people are going to be like, well, actually, there's this couple that is also like that, and I'm sure they're out there. But in the sense of having two people who are not related by blood, but who have been connected for decades and have gone from basically beginning together to way up to the main event of WrestleMania, I think they're pretty close to unique. And the fact that they kept it all consistent and it all makes sense as one story was really amazing to discover and to write down. So I found it a real pleasure to write, and I hope that people find it a real pleasure to read.
Now, this may be way too soon because your first book is not out till later this week or next, but are there more wrestling books in the future? Did you enjoy the writing process? Like, do you see yourself staying in this world?
I would love to. It takes a certain level of hyper focus to dig into that much history. And so far I haven't found anything that catches my attention in the same way, but I'm hoping that there'll be something out there. One of the things I do love, and this might be one that he's going to retire moderately soon, is Tetsuya Naito and his sort of history, especially with the Intercontinental Belt. I don't know if you guys know the history behind him. Yeah, yep. I thought so. And I know I've written about it. My tendency to make gifs of New Japan got squashed because they come down so hard on anybody that makes gifs. And I've discovered that if I can't make gifs, it's hard for me to follow stuff now. But his story would be an interesting one to write up. But I actually was there live at the Wrestle Kingdom where he finally beat Okada, which was an amazing main event. So that's one of the other things that might interest me. I don't know. It would be harder to get access because so much of it is in Japanese, of course. And my Japanese is pretty good, but it's not that level.
Better than mine.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. With you being in Japan, do you follow a lot of Japanese wrestling? Do you get the live events ever?
We used to go. We went to a lot of New Japan shows. Went to some DDT Pro shows. Got to see an
God bless.
exploding barbed wire match show there. Went to Dragon Gate shows a couple of times. We have not as much since the pandemic because my job picked up a lot during the pandemic and it's been harder to get out. But
This is just me throwing, I'm not saying, hey, write a book about this, but if you're looking for a weird long-term relationship to pick apart in wrestling, Senshiro Takagi from DDT and Munenori Sawa have a very fun and weird history together.
yeah,
So
okay.
that's just my recommendation if you have a lazy Sunday and you're looking for some wrestling rabbit hole to fall down.
I will. We
In
really have
DDT,
enjoyed DDT Pro.
In DDT, Sawa lost a, loser must become, what's the Japanese word is, I think, Ipanjin, for like ordinary man.
Okay, yeah.
So every time Sawa appears sometimes he appears as Lingerie Muto, and that's a whole different thing. But every time Sawa appears as himself in DDT now, he's wearing like a salary man's outfit in like
He's got to
breakaway
just
clothes.
wear normal clothing.
Right, but it's all like tearaway stuff. So during the match, like his pants are half torn off, his necktie is half pulled off.
I like that.
But it just the kind of long term. It's DDT is one of those things where I think there are a lot of people who think that it's just Dan Shokudino stuffing people's heads down his pants and Kota Ibushi
Is
and
that as
Takeshita
well?
or whoever. But there is a lot of long term weird
Yes.
and funny and
A lot of weird
idiosyncratic lore.
consistency. There's a lot of commitment to the bit, I guess I would say.
Yeah, and it over the course of 20 years, it becomes this ongoing strange narrative, which I think, as you're highlighting in your book, is one of the idiosyncratic strengths of wrestling, is that we can form these narratives that are
insanely long, that don't pay off. I believe when I was writing about it at one point, I was writing just after Kofi won the World Championship. And in a book, I said in a fictional book, you could start with, as Kofi Kingston prepared to go out, he thought about the last 20 years of his career that he had struggled through. And in wrestling, you can't do that. You have to actually do the whole 20 years of struggle. You can't shortcut any of it. It's an amazing storytelling medium.
Yeah, and you can do it everywhere from the big to small. You can do Mercedes Moné from Chaotic Wrestling in Andover, Massachusetts, to Big Business for AEW, or you can just do it straight on the macro scale. 40 years of WrestleMania. There is a lot of the reason I'm saying this right now is because we have a lot of people on our Discord who are like, "Oh, I want to write about wrestling," and I think kind of talk themselves out of realizing just how much virgin territory there is.
There's just huge swaths that I think nobody has ever covered.
I saw you mention this with Jonathan Snowden's interview he did with you. But the thing about wrestling is, I think about this too all the time, is you almost said you don't want to hear what Kevin and Sami were thinking, because it's like, I've always said that where I'm like, I don't care what Dusty Rhodes was thinking, because I don't want him to just like, shit on what I thought about all his matches. Like what I feel is what I feel. So it's like almost like you don't want Kevin Sami to go through the book with like a red pen going, no, not quite.
Not that was not what we were thinking. That's interesting, but no.
Yeah.
I know Kevin said someplace that that he was disappointed in Final Battle 2010, and I was so crushed. But I think in part it was just that it wasn't perfect enough to justify him losing his job for a year, basically.
Well, the story is that Ricky Steamboat doesn't think highly of his WrestleMania 3 match with Randy Savage because it wasn't called in the ring. Great match, absolutely insane wrestler brain criticism of it is like, well, I put on this legendary match that people remember 40 years later, but I don't like that one because we planned out the spots. Which, as an aside,
that's just the kind of thing that we don't, as wrestling fans, we don't know one way or the other. So what?
As an aside, I never watched the Kevin Steen show, but I did watch the entirety of Best Friends as it was coming out. And what still sticks with me is when, I can't remember which episode it was, but it was one of those ones that they must have filmed at Battle of Los Angeles because there were a whole bunch of people in the room. And the question came up of who's the most annoying person to plan out a match with, and unanimously the room was like, "Oh, Rami."
Yep. Oh, definitely. That crops up in the book over and over again, that he drives people crazy to work with him. Kevin's up there too, though. They're both crazy perfectionists.
I take this back if it turns out that I'm wrong, but I think it was Trent Beretta was saying that he would go out there and do chops on a show with like 200 people when it was, like half the guys were like, no, if it's not a full house, like don't chop my chest.
There's an interview actually with Chris Jericho where he says they were planning out a ladder match and Kevin and Sami kept coming up with insane spots. And Jericho kept saying, no, we're not doing that. No, we're not doing that either. So, yes.
That is the story that they used to tell about Matt Hardy, was he would tell all the veterans, like, okay, we're going to do this thing and then that thing. And apparently all the old guys in WWE circuit, like,
no, we're not.
Hated him for it.
Well, I would love to see the people on your Discord write more books. I think there's a lot of space for it. And I think if you can find what it is that's important to you and find your own sort of voice as a writer, I think that takes a little while. But I think it's a really valuable project. And I think any book that's written from the heart about something that you like will be worth buying.
I don't know if this is too much like... I was saying, I don't know if it's too much like how the sausage was made, but like, how did you get linked up with Hybrid Shoot and those guys?
I think Snowden's wife followed me on Twitter and was interested in my stuff and wrote him, well, didn't write him, obviously, got in touch with him and said, this person would be an interesting person to write a whole book about. So why don't you get in touch with them? And so I got a DM from Snowden saying, would you be interested in this? And to be honest, I didn't respond. It took me a while to accept that such a thing could be real in a way. And so I was like, yeah, I guess that's a good idea. And then didn't respond again for like 6 months where I could have been getting more work done. And then finally I was like, oh, you mean this? You mean really write a book? Oh, okay. And then I got into it more. But I was slow to realize it was an actual thing.
I think in a perfect world, we'd have something like the 30. I don't know if any of the rest of you are familiar with the 33 1/3 monograph series, where each book is about a classic album. And the approaches that they take, they're all, 150 pages long. They're little books. I don't know if they still publish them. I hope they do. But the approach is so wildly different from every author. Some of them were personal narratives, autobiographical of how the music intersected with their life. Some of them straight biographies, some of them music theory. When I was in grad school, I read those books a lot just as a quick way to expose myself, to make sure that I wasn't sinking into a rut of only reading, the kind of voice that I wanted to write like. And, I didn't want to end up being just a knockoff of someone else. I thought it was really important to expand. And God bless you for being another voice people can read. Hopefully more voices follow. Hopefully we get a lot more writing that isn't just match reviews.
I'm looking at the physical copy right now on Hybrid Shoot's Twitter, and I just want to say
they tweeted about it just as I started the interview here.
Yeah, it was like perfect timing, and I want to say it's very funny that they apparently lost their physical copy of Way of the Blade because they just have a picture of the cover on. They have a picture of the cover on an iPad next to physical copies of all the other books, and I think that's really funny. But I mean, all this stuff that they've published already has been. I mean, if these 6 books are all radically different, and I think that's that's interesting.
Yeah,
and awesome.
I love that
that's
too.
out
They're
there.
all really, really different. So they've got a real range. Hybrid Shoot's doing a great job of having just a huge range of voices and approaches.
And your book also has illustrations. The name of the illustrator is eluding me, and I'm not standing at my computer to check.
Jamie
Maybe
Shellhammer. Yeah.
yes. How did you get into contact? How did they? Was that through Hybrid Shoot? Was that someone you were aware of and
Yeah,
said
I know her.
suggested?
We're friends on Twitter. She's been a fan of Kevin's, especially Kevin's, but both Kevin and Sami for quite a while now, and I've loved her work. So when Snowden suggested I find an illustrator, I was like, oh, okay, I'll ask Jamie first.
Well, that's awesome. I greatly appreciate you coming on here and talking about it, and I cannot wait to read it. I'm gonna go ahead and we usually do the plugs after the Q&A, but I'm gonna go ahead and just say that I'm sure the Indiegogo link will be in the podcast description. It's Fight Forever, the Ballad of Kevin and Sami, and it is insanely cheap. It's $5 for the ebook, so there's just everyone should just go buy it.
Yeah, if you go on the Discord and say that you pirated this, we're gonna ban you. Those are the stakes.
Appreciate that. Thank you for both the plug and the threat.
Speaking of, did GCW hit you with any legal troubles over the name Fight Forever?
No one has.
Okay, because when AEW called their video game Fight Forever, GCW sued.
Did they?
Yeah.
I don't think. I think I'm such a smaller fish.
Well, just keep your eye out for Brett Lauderdale in your DMs.
Go around talking to all the people who are chanting it at a show. Can't use that chant.
Oh yeah.
But that is going to bring us to Q&AR, our question and answer section. Sam, I don't know if you're still there, but he's back. We did not get a ton of questions, and my favorite question is for Chris, and he's not here. It is from Porik. Besides his ballot, who had the best ballot? So I'd like Sam and Pat, I'd like you guys your best guess on who submitted the best ballot.
Who the fuck else had Mance Warner at number 4? Come on.
It's got to be you. All right.
I was going to say, I know who has the worst ballot.
I had the only good ballot of the entire thing. It's like me and like 83 dinguses.
Only one person had Mike Payne in the top 30, and you're talking to him. So
I'm going to go on a limb and say only 2 people had Mike Payne.
What a bummer that's going to be when I see that. It's like,
you only convinced me.
Well, I mean, the Mike Payne stuff came up after I had already submitted my ballot twice because I forgot. I had to submit mine twice because as soon as I sent it, I realized I had forgotten Eodel Fishman, and that was important enough that I'm like,
yeah.
I think he's at like number 8 on the ballot, so that was important enough for me to like flag down Chris. Like I gotta resend mine.
Our next question is from Orchard's wife. What is your dream wrestler versus Muppet death match? Pat?
Obviously, it would be Billy. I'm counting Billy the Puppet as a Muppet for purposes of this question. And it would be Billy the Puppet versus Tara Zepp.
Oof.
Sam, do you have one?
Animal versus George the Animal Steel feels like the clear one.
Okay. See, my first thought is I want to do Animal. I was going to take Animal, but I'm going to change it, but you said it, so I'll change it to Fozzie the Bear versus Onita.
Why Fozzie? Why Fozzie?
I think Fozzie, I mean, he's a bear. So I think he's got like maybe a violent side we don't know about.
Okay.
Plus he's good at working the crowd.
Yeah, it's true. JJ, do you have a Muppet versus wrestler death match you want to book?
Does not even death match.
It's gotta be Gonzo though. I think Gonzo as a sort of performance artist would be really into a death match. I mean, a lot of his bits are basically death. I might put him against there's a wrestler in DDT Pro called Mao. who's very flippy and very good, and I think would be very willing to sell Muppet offense.
I was actually just thinking, what if it was Miss Piggy in the main event of a surrealism show?
I mean, Gonzo coming out of a cannon's a pretty good finish.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an amazing finish. But I do think Miss Piggy is still the best pure striker of the Muppets.
Yeah, definitely.
Our next question comes from Nick Yeoman. You are going on a 10-hour drive. You have to pick a wrestler as a passenger. That wrestler is in charge of music, snacks, where you stop, etc. Who are you taking? Now, I've told a story of being in a road trip with Simon Gotch where he calls my aunt a cunt. So I will not pick him. And I'll have to think about my answer. Sam, do you got one?
None. I refuse to answer going on in a car
for 10 hours.
Any period of time with a professional wrestler. I decline. I decline the invite, Dan, but thank you for asking.
All right, JJ, you got any road trip partner?
Well, I'd have to choose between Kevin and Sami probably, and it can't be Sami because I don't think I could do a road trip with somebody vegan. The snacking would be too hard. So I'd go with Kevin because Kevin lets whoever he's with. I don't know about the sky either.
Yeah,
Kevin tends to let he doesn't care about music, so he tends to let the other person pick their music. So I feel like I'd have more musical freedom that way.
Pat, what about you?
So that's
it's obvious for me. The Kentucky Gentleman, Chuck Taylor. Imagine that car ride. It'd be amazing. Unless it turns out he has IBS or something, he's just gonna be farting for 10 hours. It'll be great.
I don't like the idea of a 10-hour road trip. Like full stop right there. And now I get to be stuck in a car with a big wrestler. So I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna go back on what I said and just do Simon Gotch because I already know how terrible he is. I won't wrestler.
No surprises.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin what I like.
That way you get do Aiden English. That way you get the full spectrum, both sides of the coin. Maybe he's a perfect gentleman. Maybe he knows your aunt, enjoys her.
Steph asks if you could get
Yoshihiko is a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
Steph asks if you could get a secret base beef history video made for any wrestling feud, which would it be? Feels like JJ has a pretty easy answer. I'm going to guess I know what it is.
That's a pretty safe one. Naito and the IC title would be my second choice, if not Kevin and Sami.
All right. Sam, you got one for this question, or did you reject it as a whole?
I need to reject it just on its face. Bad question. Give me better.
I like that for every question you just you won't even accept it.
No. Just can't accept.
All right, Pat.
Great Sasuke versus Dirt Bike Kid. I don't know.
Beautiful, perfect.
It'd be a quick video, but it'd be a good one.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't know. It'd probably have to be something like, I'd like to do something like LA Park and Roosh, so we can just talk about the amount of times they've not had the mask match, the mask versus hair match. They challenged each other to an asbestos match. It didn't happen. They challenged each other.
Mystico versus anyone.
Mystico challenged me to a mask match the other day.
I mean, that's the thing. Anytime Mystico loses, he gets his heat back by saying, I want your hip mask or I want your hair. No intention of ever coming back and doing it, but that's how he gets his heat back when he loses.
Okay. Eamon asks, who's your favorite jobber / enhancement talent of all time? I'm going to try again, Sam. Do you like this question?
No, not really.
All right. You're harsh tonight. JJ, do you have a favorite jobber?
Well, Does Brax count?
Well, that's
no.
I've been watching Brax here, and I don't know. Does he count as a jobber? He's kind of compelling.
I don't think he's going to be doing a lot of jobs. He's like the tallest person in the promotion.
My honest answer would probably be Antonio Honda from DDT Pro, who has a tendency in the middle of a match to stop and tell a long, shaggy dog story that all the wrestlers are compelled to stop and listen to.
No, you missed the important part of it. He gets into the ring falls the exact same way every time, clutches his knee, and claims that his knee is now so injured that he has to retire. But before he retires, please listen to this
He has a
story.
story to tell. There was actually a match we were at once where he did that. He fell down. He hurt his knee. Was about to launch in the story and then looked over at us and apologized because it wasn't going to be in English. So he wasn't sure we would understand it.
And the story is always filthy. At least every time I've seen a translation of it is just like, usually just like, penis jokes, basically.
You can kind of tell from the way he delivers it. So
Yeah. You can kind of tell from the way he pantomimes a giant penis rap.
that too.
My answer would also be from DDT. It would be Goda Ihashi, who is Kota Ibushi's friend, who is like the shorter, fatter, less talented Kota Ibushi.
I really like when Perry Saturn beats up Mike Bell, so I'm gonna go with that one.
All-time great
Maybe
match.
does I don't know. I feel like the Mulkey Brothers like a lame real answer, but that's what I'll say too.
Sam, is it
here's
too
a really
late to add Perry Saturn versus Mike Bell to my Desert Island comp?
Actually, literally for you, it's not.
Yeah, you have
Perfect.
a good. Don't mention Desert Island comp. It's coming out when it's coming out. Haven has a good question. Pancakes or waffles? I think I'm against the grain. I'm a pancake guy.
Haven also says there's a clear right answer.
That's terrifying because it's like I don't know what mine's pancakes.
I like waffles. But I'll eat either. So,
Sam,
it's a real question about: do you prefer something with like a high floor or a high ceiling? And I prefer kind of a high floor. So give me a waffles every day of the week. Literally, if you can, put that butter in those little squares. Gobble gobble.
Do you do a lot of syrup or only a little syrup? I think that's the real defining question of a person.
I do a healthy amount of syrup. Gotta get all them squares covered.
So only one pitcher of syrup, not two.
Correct.
JJ, do you have a favorite?
I talked over JJ. Sorry.
I agree. It's got to be waffles, but it has to be real maple syrup, or it's a no-go. Picky about my maple syrup. I'm from Maine originally, so.
Oh. Yeah,
gotta be good maple syrup.
See, I like the cheap stuff. Whatever's on sale. It all tastes the same to me.
Yeah. One time early in my relationship with my wife, when I was going to the grocery store, she put on syrup, which I was supposed to know was real maple syrup.
Real maple syrup.
So I came home with some cabin trash. Yeah. Pancake syrup. That did not go over well.
Tested your relationship.
It truly. Well, she was not mad, and you could sense that some disappointment was had here. Oof. That I would even begin to think that was the right.
I'm not mad, but maybe I've made a mistake here.
There's a lot of questioning how she ended up with me at that point.
I'm in Boston, so I've never really had to worry about it. I've always had, actual maple syrup within easy reach. It's like getting seafood in New England. It's like it's always there. So I feel privileged that I've never had to really worry about being force-fed filth like log cabin.
Eamon has another one for us. They were watching Deal or No Deal, and they wanted to know what's your favorite game show and which game show would you most likely to succeed on. Sam, do you watch game shows?
I used to watch a lot of game shows. I used to come home after school, put on the Game Show Network, see what they're doing. Fan of two ones in particular. Press Your Luck, the new one, not the old one. Don't know why. I think the aspect where the whammy monster has a bowling alley style cartoon when you hit him is great. And Card Shark, which is
Oh,
just
that's
rife with a lot going on there on every episode.
That's my answer for both my favorite and what I think I would do well on. I watched so much Card Sharks growing up that I'm like, I feel like I was prepped for something that I can't do because it doesn't exist. JJ, do you have any game show favorites? Anything you think you'd excel at?
I've watched a lot recently of a British show called Only Connect, which is finding connections between clues, which I'm terrible at. If I can even start to guess, then I'm feeling happy about it. I actually think I could put in a modest but acceptable showing on Jeopardy, perhaps. I could come in a respectable third, perhaps. I wouldn't come in negative.
I don't know if Only Connect is anything like the New York Times Connections, but I have a...
It's very, very similar, to the point where they made a joke about the New York Times stealing it from them.
Oh, that's funny. I only solve about 55% of those, according to my app. I'm not good at that game.
A lot of them are about British culture and British sports as well, and I'm completely clueless on that. So I just sort of sit there and admire people who can do it.
Pat, what about you?
My favorite of all time is probably Jeopardy, and yeah, I think depending on what the spread of categories is for the day, I could probably come in a respectable third.
All right. We have two more questions. Henry says, if Chapel Roan eventually does a wrestling match, who do you think would her best tag team partner / opponent be? Can be any wrestler from any promotion. I like they say that. Like we were like thought we were going to be pigeonholed.
Well, while the rest of you consider who Chapel Roan should team with, I do have an answer from Jade, who is the Discord's Chapel Roan superfan. Current Soberano Jr. People need to realize that as vibrant and bright as Chapel is, she's incredibly divaful and would maybe not get along so well with most of the people pitched to be her partners. Soberano Jr. would come out to Red Wine Supernova if he heard it. Soberano Jr. is who I think of when I hear Hot to Go. Soberano Jr. is Chapel Roan. All time, the Giant in 1998, don't feel like elaborating.
I love that.
I feel like I got robbed.
I can't argue
by
with
you
that.
going with her first, because the answer
You know
is
Sam
Soberano
Alvey.
Jr.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Yeah.
I was getting it off my tongue, and you said, "Well, let me tell you what Jade said." Gosh darn it! She got the right answer.
Well, I thought you would enjoy this moment of connection with one of the listeners, with one of the readers of the site, but instead you
I really despise listeners. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Have you listened to him on this episode at all? He's not a huge fan of them.
Yeah, I've denied their questions at multiple turns.
All right, well then I'm going to say she should team with Mike Payne. So fuck you.
Sometimes I think I'm like a child. My brain's so simplistic. I was like, oh, Chapel Roan, Pink Pony Club, Pink, Bret Hart, got it.
You know what? It works.
That was
that's not the
instantaneously
worst
what
answer.
happened. That's how my brain works. Like instantaneously said Bret Hart, done.
I am honestly shocked that Jade did not suggest that Chapel Roan throws Chi-Chi through the barbershop window.
JJ, do you have a pick for Chapel teammate?
I'm leaning towards either Bianca or Tony Storm. Just in terms of drama. Either as a tag team partner or as an opponent. But I don't know if I can beat Bret Hart.
Jade has our last question as well, and it's actually it leads us into a question I have just for JJ. Maybe we should start with that. What is your favorite Saw film from the Saw franchise? I assume you have one.
You know what? I had been listening to some of your podcasts to prepare for this, and I was like, if they ask me what my favorite Saw film is, I do not know what I'm going to say because I don't have one. So I'm just going to admit it to you that I'm going to be honest with you. That I've been stuck in Japan and I don't have one.
I'm just going to, that's that one. We'll take it out in post.
Well, then this question is not going to mean anything to you. If Tobin Bell never existed, what professional wrestler would you cast as Jigsaw? Which I feel like we kind of already answered in the past episode as who would be like his best assistant. We landed on Josh Barnett, which I still think is a
totally different question. Dan.
Oh no,
I actually
totally
don't know what you're talking about right now.
Oh my god!
Are you serious?
The question was just on a scale of 1 to 10, how good would Josh Barnett be as a Jigsaw assistant? And we agreed it was
You're right.
20.
Okay, Sam, Pat, explain to me who should be the answer.
So it has to be someone old who has a vicious mean streak, and yet can nonetheless be seen as the hero in a twisted sense, in that Jigsaw's whole raison d'etre is to awaken people to the kind of life that they should be leading, just maybe absent an arm or a leg or a head. So with that in mind, I think the only answer is Karrion Kross. Because that is his.
How old is Karrion Kross for you to say he needs to be old?
That was your first criteria too, by the way. It has to be old.
Well, yeah,
he's 39, which I think is your age.
Yeah, and so I feel fucking so old. Also, I think Karrion Kross does have brain cancer. That's the sense I get from watching clips of him. So, obvious fit for Jigsaw.
So
Sam, do you have
my first criteria was must have a podcast. That felt like that's the mold that we're looking at here. But I didn't go with a wrestler. So we did go with Jim Cornette.
Jim Cornette would be the assistant who got away 20 years ago and has become Dark Jigsaw.
I love the idea of a more evil Jigsaw. That's for Saw 11.
Yeah, that's Jigsaw who doesn't respect the rules of the Saw traps.
Well, to be fair, that is just... I forget her
that's
completely.
The assistant he's ever had, yeah.
But it happens.
They all end up fucking monsters.
I think that does it for Q&AR. Considering Sam had to pry those questions out of the listener, they didn't want to answer. Usually they give us too many. They didn't give us any this week. I think that was great. Yeah, I think that was a great show. JJ, I think we already plugged it, but anything else you want to mention before we go?
I would encourage people to follow Hybrid Shoot. They're in the middle of publishing a bunch of really great books right now. They're working on Way of the Blade 2. They've got Shane Hagedorn's working on a history of Ring of Honor. I'm looking forward to both of them a lot. So buy my book and look at Hybrid Shoot's other books. And thank you very much for having me here.
And we never spelled it out, but it's MITH.
Snyder's been soon for 2. Yes, MITH Gifts on Twitter. Hybrid Shoot, I believe it's just Hybrid Shoot on Twitter. On Blue Sky as well. Yeah, thanks again for coming.
Yes.
Read the site.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep.
Fantastic.
All right, I think that does it. That was good.
All right,
Yeah,
Chris is
thanks a lot,
I
guys.
love that you
fun.
knew we were going to ask you about Saul. That
I knew
cracks
it.
me up.
I knew it. I was like, what do I say? I have no idea.